My point though is this, the dichotomy will be very clear. If it is data oriented, it will be made to be online. If it is aesthetically driven, it will be made to be in print. Does that make sense? I just gave you the result of an extraordinarily expensive survey. Sincerely. Because here are the trends up front. All of the major magazines have already announced, though they have not implemented it, that all the major magazines are actually going to increase in size. There are going to be two magazine sizes. There's going to be what is known as the Euro size, which is Reader Digest size, and I actually have, well, I don't have it with me. I actually have copies of Vogue, Mademoiselle, all of the Seven Sisters and all that size. What is the tagline behind this? It needs to fit into a lady's purse. It needs to be portable. Does that make sense? If not, yeah, absolutely. For commuting purposes, whatever. The inverse is, I'm going to make it as big as I can, because when you open, let me tell you something, and I'm asking you this sincerely. Have you ever opened up a magazine where it was a 2-page spread, rich printing, beautiful? Were you not overcome by the beauty of it? Sincerely? That's exactly what we know about us humanly. Do I want to read National Geographics or the Architectural Digest, or do I want to see that on a tablet? No, absolutely not. In fact, here's the most important thing I can share with you. It will only take us a few years until we push back to the publishers and say, I will not read a magazine or a catalog on a phone. It's the wrong format. It's the wrong size. Don't bother spending the money pushing it out in mobile media. It doesn't make any sense. Phones are for texting, they are for email, they are for phoning, they are for games. I don't even want to watch a movie on a phone. Does that make sense?
Very quickly, you said data-oriented online?
Yes.
You meant information?
Information, if it's information-based. But if it is aesthetically based, we want it in print. And if we want it in print, all of the surveys say that we want it larger. We're worried about magazines getting smaller and smaller. Large format magazines will absolutely be the case. I promise you that.
The two sizes, the
Euro size and then oversized. Large format, LF. So does all this make sense? I got to keep moving. I still got a bunch of slides. And I got to tell you up front, I have given you so much of the back end of the presentation up front, so don't worry if we don't get to it. But does that make sense? I want you to stop and realize, first of all, this, when we talk about the evolution of public relations to becoming social networking, does that make sense? Okay? And more importantly, what I want you to understand is this is the democratization of communication. People want to shoot their own TV commercials. People want to be their own public relations agents. Let me put it this way to you, and I'm not being mean or facetious in when I say this. There are people who think, who have a level of self-importance, that they think that what they do and their lives is so glamorous and so wonderful that they should be letting the rest of the world know. Well, yeah, I mean, some is true, of course, yeah, but
later.
okay. Does that make sense? And unfortunately, that's very true about blogs. Let me ask you an honest question. Do you believe blogs?
Not all of them.
Say it again.
Not all of them.
Okay, and what's your discrimination? What do you use?
It depends on the credibility of
Yeah.
the author.
Perfect. Huffington? Yes. Right?
Right.
Amy's Coffee Corner?
Not
Maybe
so-
not. Yeah, exactly. Unless I read it enough and I go, oh, I like her opinion. We see the same way about movies or whatever. Does that make sense? You have to, in just the same way, you have to build up visibility and credibility. If I were to send you an email one day and say that I was starting a blog on graphic design and marketing, you might follow it. Hopefully, I've got some credibility with you. The first couple of times that I sound like I'm talking out of my hat, you're like, dude, step away from the hookah, you know? This is not good. So anyway, very quickly, what we need to understand about the new business model. Our customers have become media agnostic. Why? Because we have so many devices, right? I could as easily get it on my phone as my tablet, as on my monitor, or on TV, or on the radio, or anything else. It's whoever gets to me first at the time. We may have our favorites, okay? I get a phone call, somebody says to me, oh my God, turn on the TV, you know, something's happened. I don't turn on the TV. I personally go to my computer and I boot up BBC. I want an international, global viewpoint. I don't want it necessarily going through American journalistic filters. Not that they're bad, but that I will say that they're skewed. Does that make sense? So my point though is we all have our favorites. Absolutely on demand. Perfect example. You get that call, where do you go? You expect it to be there, whether it's your phone, whatever device. I expect, and your audience absolutely expects personalization. The concept of mass customization becomes the most important thing possible. The idea, and here's the interesting thing, we talked about it earlier in QR codes. There is no device that at which point somebody clicks in that I don't know who you are. I don't have access to knowing who you are. And here's the interesting thing, subliminally, I know that. So I expect that when you contact me, you know who I am and what my first name is. Sorry. And I expect you to use it. Or, better yet, I don't expect it to be dear resident or dear current resident. How insulting can that be? Okay? And here's the key. It has to be in real time. This has completely changed and redefined journalism as we know. I will not pay you today for yesterday's news. I already got it. What does that say to the larger journalistic world? It's not that I don't believe in you. It is rather, I want your editorial opinion. I want you to explain to me why this is important. I want you to make me understand why this event impacts me, my world, my family, my community, my job. What are we going to see? In the next 3 to 5 years, basically, you're going to see us having, honestly, at most, 7 national papers, probably 5. Why? Because let's be honest, do you care what's happening in San Francisco? No. If it's national news, we're getting it from another device. Does that make sense? But what we're really concerned about is what's happening in Washington, D.C., Baltimore. What is our news, our sports, our politics, our art, our education? So what you're seeing already is this migration of great nationalist journalists going to the local level. And supplementing their national salaries now with blogs. You will have to start paying for blogs. Content is not free. If there is one major challenge that we have in publishing and in broadcasting is convincing people that content is not free. We made a huge mistake with the web. And the web was that everybody gave everything away for free. And let me tell you something. It was not free. It has never been free. It cost an enormous amount of money to put satellites up in the air. And guess what? Yeah, you know what? You may not like them, but Rupert Murdoch paid for it. And Hearst paid for it. And Condé Nast paid for it. You know, and all these huge companies, NBC and ABC, etc., and NPR, they all paid for it. That's why they're asking you to start paying for it. Now, because here's the interesting thing. Key point, 10 years later, we look down from 50,000 feet and we realize that the ROI on the web sucks.
So how do you put the genie back in the box?
You
Now,
don't.
people are used to paying
Because
for it,
here's
and
the
you're
interesting
gonna pay
thing.
for it.
We are now starting to charge for apps for the first time. And we were going to start charging you for more and more. The reality is, it's a fabulous book, by the way. If you ever have a chance to read it, totally worthwhile. And it's called Free. It's written by Chris Anderson, who is the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. And what he basically said, which is absolutely true, corporations like yours will always have to put out reports, okay? But the reality is, you don't have to give everybody all the information. What Chris says, which is absolutely true, is you are going to have multi-tiers of access. I'm going to give a lot of information to everybody. Except if you are a member, quote unquote, you will have access to a much higher level of information and editorial opinion and consultation. And guess what? Truthfully, that 10 or 20% of the membership group that pays $200 per year, in fact, makes it available to the other 80%. But the other 80% are only getting a portion of the information, and they know it. They see a story that they want, and they click on it. This is, sorry, members only. After they do that for a while, either they're going to become members or they're not going to get the information. That's the truth. We're not chumps anymore. We have been for a while. No, I'm serious. We honestly, because here's the interesting thing. It's like, let me ask you an honest question. How many of you think banner ads really work? Of course not. But in the early days, that was the advertising. We'll sell you a banner ad, and all of us figured out how to click buy them or get rid of them. So it didn't work. That business model didn't work. And it's okay. That is the evolution of life. You try stuff, it doesn't work, you evolve, you do other things. Anyway, we talked about this essentially. Please, if you are not already going to the Peppers and Rogers website, I cannot invite you more strongly. Don Peppers wrote the original book on one-to-one marketing and personalization in 1993, by the way. He is a world-class thought leader. His partner, Martha Rogers, a year later wrote the book on intimacy selling. She said, because essentially what Don Pepper said is, you have got to rethink your marketing to do target marketing. Now, keep in mind, this is before variable data. But he said, you've got to do target marketing. You've got to use a different voice for each market. You've got to use different language for each market. You've got to make them believe that you're speaking to them. Martha Rogers said, if you're going to do target marketing, you're doing intimacy selling. And in intimacy selling, that means that you have to do your due diligence. You have to know as much as you possibly can about that target market. She basically validates the concept of data mining. That says, I want to know everything about you I possibly can, so that when I send out that package, you start to read it and you go, yeah, that's exactly who I am. You're not wasting my time. But please go, this is their website, www.one-to-one-media.com. Their sister publications happen to be B2B and B2C, superb. So 6 years ago, they do a survey. What's the best way to build a brand, build brand loyalty and customer relations? 6 years ago, it was direct mail and a website. They redid the survey 2 years ago. It is still direct mail, and now instead of a website, it is social media. Why? Because, again, timeliness and relevancy. By the way, go to their website. It's a beautiful website. It's real, it's short, it's quick. Headlines, pick the story that you want. A lot of stuff on financial, a lot of stuff in investment, banking, marketing, merchandising. So they really do it by industry. And then there are all these free white papers. One of the white papers is, by the way, they are the ones who came up with the concept of lifetime value. And how long is the value of a customer? By the way, 3.1 years, sorry to tell you. And I hope at some point I can come back and do a direct mail presentation, because I think you'll find it really interesting. But they wrote this white paper called Relationship Marketing. And what is it? It really talks about that survey. And here's the key. What they said was, you cannot have, in the current business model, you cannot have a truly valid sales strategy or marketing strategy that does not have a voice of the customer component within it. You come up with a sales strategy, you come up with a marketing strategy, you start to talk to your audience about it in real time right away. Is this relevant? Does this matter to you? Would you in fact be interested? And they are coming back to you in real time, telling you yes or no. You're doing that market research in real time. Why is that so important? I'll be the first one to tell you. I have been buying 7 digits worth of market research on an annual basis for a long time. The first thing that I will tell you is, quite honestly, it takes too long.